What's the password? Welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. Brought to you by the record button.
Hello and welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. My name is Cody.
And I'm Lance.
And we welcome you through the doors and into a comfy as heck chair. What do we like to do here, Lance?
Drink and talk about tabletop gaming.
Correct. The Game Master Speakeasy is a haven not just for Game Masters. Don't let the name fool you. We call it that because it is hosted by Game Masters, and we like to think that Game Masters could use their own special place. But that said, the doors...
a drink.
And a good drink from time to time. But the door is open to everyone, Game Masters and players alike. Just know that if you are a Game Master, you will get special treatment. Yeah,
yep.
That's not... We're not going to beat around the bush about that.
10% GM...
You deserve it, buddy.
10% GM discount at the bar.
Yeah, and today's bartender's name is Crawford. And Crawford today has served us a wonderful Cabernet Sauvignon, a red wine for those who are unfamiliar with the term. But let's first go into the news for today. I have a couple things to talk about. Gen Con has happened.
This is going to be a long segment.
No, it's not going to be.
You don't think so?
Well, it's going to be a long segment because one of the news articles is also going to be our main topic.
Okay,
later.
well, then,
So,
yeah.
But first, Gen Con happened, and there were a lot of things to talk about from that, but the number one takeaway that I want to touch on is Rage of Elements was announced. Pathfinder by Paizo, from Pathfinder 2nd Edition specifically. They have because basically their release schedule is every year they announce next year's big release, right? And so this year's big release was Dark Archive. Which
I like that one.
Yes, which had both the Psychic and the Thaumaturge as character classes in it. And the playtest has already dropped for the Kineticist, which is as I understand it, a very beloved first edition class, which is kind of it's like 2 parts Avatar: The Last Airbender bender and then like 1 part kind of wushu style elemental slinging. I don't know. It's got a little bit of it's any type of character that is going to focus on elemental slinging of spells and or effects and abilities. The Kineticist is kind of the go-to.
It sounds like the internet's mad about it.
It's become a very controversial playtest immediately off the ground, and I'll say why. Part of why is because in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, casters are balanced. Most people want a blaster caster, someone whose sole job is to do damage via spells. Now, the Psychic can fill in that role, but the Psychic also has a very specific class fantasy that not everyone wants, whereas the Kineticist kind of does that. You can choose fire, earth, water, lightning, what have you, and then use that. Well, lightning is... I'm talking about first edition.
Okay.
That was one of the heat points of second edition, is that the air Kineticist doesn't have easy access to lightning blasts.
Okay.
But this is a playtest, right? If you look at the Magus playtest and the Gunslinger playtest, there were huge issues with those that were fixed before released. But the reason that I believe that the Kineticist lacks in the damage department is because it does not focus on... It literally does not have focus points, and it does not have spell slots. Everything it can do is only limited by the action economy. It can do everything it can do it all day.
I mean, that's kind of cool.
Right. And whereas, you want the ability to do good magical damage at a distance, there are certain problems with it, which I am confident, most of which will get hammered out in the playtest. But one example is... your elemental blast, you can do it at range or you can do it in melee, but because it has the manipulate trait, if you use it in melee, you're making an opportunity attack that causes, you're making a melee attack that causes attacks of opportunity, right? Which is like, come on. There needs to be an exception for that.
It's a good way to get punched in the face is what that is.
If you want the class fantasy of being an elemental melee bruiser, now you're going to be triggering attacks from opportunity from the characters that can do that. Another couple other things is just that the raw damage output isn't super great. However, I will say this. This class, while not being the blaster caster, at least in the playtest that most people want, it does have a ton of amazing abilities for augmenting the battlefield. No other class, for no spell slots and no focus points, has the ability to change the battlefield like the Kineticist does. For example, one of the earliest feats that the Air Kineticist can have just lets you can use it to send an ally. Basically, you use 2 actions to make an ally jump.
Okay.
However, and then at higher levels, you can make them jump a greater distance. However, you can also make it, you can use it on enemies. And if you use it on a willing target, there's no save. If you use it on enemies, then there is a save.
But you can push them around.
But you can push them around. You can. So imagine that you like come into a clearing and there's a bunch of goblins up in trees. Now you can either send the warrior up the tree or just start every turn launching goblins off of trees.
Just hucking them off
right?
the trees.
Most of the classes around level 8 or 10, they get the ability to do their respective elements wall spell for 2 actions. And no focus points, no abilities. You have to sustain it, but just an earthbender, an earth kineticist, I should say, can just suddenly have a wall of earth. You know, it revolves around a cool feature where you have to gather an element as an action, and then your impulses are what they're called, your impulse abilities. Some of them have the overflow trait. And if you use one that has the overflow trait, then it expends your gathered element, and you have to spend an action to gather it before you can use your element again. So it's basically like your stronger stuff has a 1 action tax to it.
I was going to say, it's just taxing the action economy.
I think some people miss the burn that comes from 1E. Where
I've heard about the burn a little bit.
The feeling the burn, and don't get me wrong, it sucks to have to sack HP. Sack your HP maximum for the day, but also I liked the thought process that you could gather elements 3 times if you wanted to use without burn. I mean, it's baked right into Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You have 3 actions every round. If you want to spend a whole frickin' turn charging up an elemental spirit bomb to use on the round 2, that's fine. In my eyes, go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
Make some burn 3 overflow feats or impulse feats that have like 3 different levels of strength, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the option of either gathering your power more than once or taking some burn. I don't know. It seems to me like that would be the answer, but we'll see.
The good news, like you said, is it's in playtesting, so things are going to change.
Yeah.
Paizo seems pretty receptive to critiques from the player base. So, I mean, I think these things will be addressed in some capacity.
Oh, I am... Like I said, I'm confident that the end result will be a very playable and serviceable class. I just hope that they don't do what they did to the Witch, where they try to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
Because I think the Witch, while it's still a good class, I would play it. I think it would have been better if the Witch was just an occult caster and had better access to more hex cantrips or something.
Honestly, occult seems very fitting for the Witch anyway.
Right.
Like the other stuff seems like, well, why?
But now, the Witch does also serve a function where you are now a prepared caster who can choose their spell list.
Yeah.
Whereas the Sorcerer is the spontaneous caster who can choose their spell list.
Yeah.
So there was a niche to be filled, and it filled it. Speaking of listening to playtesters, Wizards of the Coast announced One D&D. All right, moving on. Broken Anvil. No, I'm just kidding. The next quote-unquote, and I'm saying this with heavy finger quotes, edition of D&D is being called One D&D, and it is starting its playtest. It has already started its playtest, and it's slated for release in 2024. It is currently 2022. I suspect it'll be a full 2 years before we see this product, but it's going to have some of the things that 4th edition lacked, which is 4th edition, as I understand it, was supposed to release with online tools, but it did not. The game released ahead of its online component, and that was one of the big reasons it suffered. Another big reason being people didn't like the changes, but One D&D is being called One D&D because it is not D&D 6th edition. I can't remember if it was Crawford or Perkins. I should say not today's bartender Crawford, but the D&D designer Jeremy Crawford or Christopher Perkins in the trailer for One D&D says that they no longer think of D&D in editions, but kind of just D&D exists, and they're essentially going to patch it as needed. So I don't know. What do you think? How do you feel about that?
I mean, I like the idea in theory of them not constantly coming out with new editions and making us buy new books, But that just means they're going to have to find another way to monetize it.
Right. Well, that's why they have this online component.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Subscription service, is that what it is?
they're bringing in their own virtual tabletop.
Yeah, no, I saw that from the video. I saw the trailer.
That's going to be how they make a lot, because that's essentially DLC for a tabletop game.
Yeah, they're going to sell you your digital
sell you
minis.
assets.
They're going to sell you digital
do you
stuff.
Do you want the red-haired wizard with the blue staff, or do you want the green-haired wizard with the sorcerer's orb, or just these? The Wizards is going to be able to tap into the ability to sell digital hats.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, but I mean, as somebody who owns a 3D printer, prints most of his own models, and likes to sit around a table with his friends, actually in person.
Yeah.
What they're offering for One D&D, it's just it doesn't really appeal that much to me.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm just and a lot of the changes that they've announced and the stuff that's gone into playtesting has honestly just been stuff to make it more like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, or at least that's the vibe that I'm getting. And maybe I'm the Debbie Downer here, but I'm like, I already have Pathfinder. I mean, you're just trying to turn D&D into Pathfinder and then sell me digital hats.
I don't blame them for doing that, though, because if you look at Blizzard's success with World of Warcraft through the years, that is what they pretty much always did. Every time a new competitor would come out, Blizzard would take a look at what that game was doing right and then just incorporate it into World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Like World of Warcraft didn't have area looting. I remember Guild Wars 2 doing that first, and then World of Warcraft incorporated it. That's the only example I can come up with off the top of my head, but I used to have like a dozen examples.
There was a lot of little changes.
There was a lot of little changes that World of Warcraft adopted from other products over the years. So this could lead to a better version of D&D, and I'm not mad about that. I am not going to turn my nose up at trying it when it comes out. However, I am going to be heavily skeptical in the process, because
I'm skeptical of everything. So
if you've read the playtest document, it seems to be 85% 5th edition so far. They haven't made too many major changes. We're going to talk about what they've done to crits later in the today's episode. We're going to talk about just natural 20s in general, because the D20 is how you interface with 5th edition.
Yeah.
Period. Same with Pathfinder. The D20 is your gateway into this world. So we're going to talk all about that. Last piece of news is, I should state that we are not sponsored by anyone. If anyone wants to sponsor us, I would love to. I love
money. I like money.
Well, I was going to say I love free STLs.
Well, that too.
Broken Anvil Miniatures, one of my favorite and most wonderful creators of miniatures. I love them so much. Broken Anvil, please sponsor us. Their September release is going to be it's going to be fantasy minis, but set in like 1920s Prohibition era.
Okay.
So it's got a 1920, like I remember seeing a goblin or something with like a flat cap and overalls or suspenders or something like that. I just really like Broken Anvil's design. I don't know the name of the artists they have on staff, but it's kudos to them. Do you remember that dude I painted with the huge katana?
Yeah.
Or the Nodachi.
He had like the big arm, big oversized arm.
The demon hunter that was like infected with a curse and has a huge sword. That is a Broken Anvil model.
That was a cool mini.
Yeah, they have a lot of cool minis. And so to have a 1920s steampunk fantasy release around the time that I'm running Call of Cthulhu, and I don't know, I just feel like I'm stoked to paint models like that.
See, and that kind of reminds me of like a weird Shadowrun-esque thing, because like that movie Bright that was on Netflix. And they made an anime, like this universe where all these fantasy races exist,
but it's just
like normal universe. That's like if you were to take the concept of Shadowrun and just start rewinding the clock
to earlier time periods.
I mean, thematically, obviously, not timeline-wise, because in Shadowrun, the sixth world, fifth world thing.
Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Shadowrun gobbledygook, for those who don't know it.
Yeah, well, just look it up. I'm not going to bore you with it.
Yeah. We had to have orcs and elves and stuff in the 1920s America, setting. Chicago and New York would be pretty sweet. All right, so that's all I've got packed in for the news segment today, except for the fact that we're going to talk about One D&D in the main topic. So moving on to what we have done recently in terms of tabletop related activities. Lance, why don't you go first?
Well, we just kind of finished our first Call of Cthulhu adventure mystery thing.
Yes.
I think last time, I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but the last time we had the party kind of split. The ladies in the party had gone upstate and were looking into some clues while the rest of the party decided we were going to go venturing around in the sewers looking for trouble. We found the missing detective. We found the missing girl that we didn't know we were looking for. Didn't know we were looking for.
You didn't know whether or not she was alive.
That's right.
Yeah, you didn't know. You knew she was missing recently, but you didn't know if she was still breathing.
And we ended up fighting one of the cult members as well as a ghoul and taking both of them out. And then escaping. We got the detective back to the police station, although I'm pretty sure he's completely insane and beyond any real appreciable help. And the girl's very wealthy parents paid us, so that was nice.
That was nice. And then we moved on to character development and kind of setting up the next adventure. And we'll have to cover the mechanics of what you guys do in your downtime next session. But now that we have completed a whole chapter in 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, what do you think of the game in a short amount of time? We don't need to bogart the whole episode on it, but just what's a good overview of your thoughts on the system?
I really enjoy it. If you're looking for a spooky, very, very, very narrative driven system, it's great. It's phenomenal. There's nothing wrong with the mechanics, but the mechanics are not the star of the show.
No,
the narrative play is the most important part. Where a lot of games have kind of an equally balanced set of pillars to their games, this doesn't. It's by design way more narrative than any of the mechanical aspects of it.
Well, as you should know, and for those listening, that is why it is essentially built on the bones of what's called the basic role-playing system. Mm-hmm. So it's supposed to be basic. It's supposed to be really easy to understand, really easy to run.
And it works extremely well for that.
Yeah.
Like, you never feel like the role system is out of place, even if you're not doing a lot of rolling.
Yeah, there's no situation where you have to roll your dice and then you got to roll your another dice for some reason and then you got to compare it to a third stat. There's none of this. It's just you rolled your dice and did you like the result or not?
Did you do good? Did you not? Okay.
All right. So then we've got that done. So this next week coming up on our Tuesday, we will play the Pathfinder session.
I'm looking forward to that. I assume that I'm going to get out of my cocoon and get my superpowers.
You can assume all you want, but it is also on point that we are drinking wine today, which is Aram's favorite beverage.
That is true. I was going to mention that, actually.
Yep, that is his choice of beverage, and we'll have that to look forward to next week. What I did this week, not a whole lot. I actually finished painting my first bust ever for a miniature bust that I gifted to my good buddy Leland.
Yeah, I saw that. You posted that onto the interwebs.
Yeah, how'd you think of the paint job?
Oh, looked great.
Yeah.
Looked absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
I'm too lazy to get that good at painting.
You could do it. I believe in you.
I believe that I could. I believe that I'm too lazy to get that good at painting.
The bust was actually not a fantasy miniature. It was a sci-fi miniature from Loot Studios. Once again, not sponsored, but would be if we could be.
They make good stuff too. I've got a little bit of their STL.
You got the whole Journey to Valhalla set.
I do, and that was worth every penny.
Yeah. Once again, not sponsored.
No. We just like cool STL files.
Yeah. I have kind of an interesting question for you. When you read novels, whether that be through picking up a book and reading it or listening to the audiobook, do you ever take a break from one and read a different one? Like, do you read more than one book at the same time, or is it only ever front to back before you can move on to the next one?
99.9% of the time, I will finish a book before I will start another one.
Okay.
The only exceptions tend to be nonfiction books that are kind of a hard...
Oh, they're just kind of dry and factual.
I went through and I have listened to Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics 5th edition front to back, as an audiobook. And it's very informative. There's a lot to be learned in that. And it is also a very academic book.
Oh, yeah.
So it's one of those that it's very hard to actually, dedicate.
It's essentially studying.
Yeah,
you're not
exactly. You're doing college.
You're studying real stuff.
College level economic studies. But if I'm talking fiction, no, I'll definitely finish a book before I start something else.
Okay, I kind of have novel ADD in a sense.
Okay.
I sometimes will. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes a book will grab me and I won't be able to put it down for a long time. But then I'll get 80% of the way through and just suddenly pick up a different book for some reason, and then I gotta force myself to go finish it. But I have recently, in the last week, I consider reading fantasy novels to be RPG experience because it's good background to draw from. There is a very popular, well, I don't know about its popularity, but it was a New York Times bestseller. It's a real big fatty of a book called The Priory of the Orange Tree, which is supposed to be, it's written by an author named Samantha Shannon. I believe she is from the UK, if I'm not mistaken. But it's, unlike most fantasy books, this is not a series. It's just one big fat book, front to back, supposedly has great world building, secret cults of worm-slaying priestesses, and other things that I get excited about. And then I'm also reading a book called Rathen, which is a series from a more indie author, and I should, for transparency's sake, say that I did receive my copy of this book for free, that you received for free, and I am borrowing from you.
No,
because we, through a friend, know the author.
I've talked to Grant a little bit.
Yeah.
Super cool guy.
The book is by Grant Elliott Smith and Stephen H. Stoller.
I'm actually most of the way through the audiobook of the first one.
Oh, really?
So I'm probably ahead of you on that.
Yeah, I'm only like 10 pages in on both of these
the
books.
thing is, and part of it's laziness, and part of it's that I have a lot going on, so I very rarely find time to be able to pick up a book and read. So I had the book and I started it, and then I ended up giving it to you and getting the audiobook because I spend a lot of time for work in my car, and it's just really easy to plop on an audiobook and go through it. And I'm not done with it, so I don't want to give it a full-on review, but so far I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
Okay.
It's really good. It's really well written. The characters are fun. It does feel like it's been written by somebody who's played tabletops.
Oh, that's
like the
perfectly
vibe
fine.
that it gives off, especially really early in the book, is like, I could see this being a D&D campaign. And as it goes on, it's given me a lot of inspiration, actually, a lot of ideas for stuff. And I'm like, I could see where you could implement these concepts into an actual tabletop and roll with it.
That exact feeling is one of the reasons I adore the Black Company. Because the Black Company feels like a grimdark D&D campaign with a bunch of characters who have nicknames, and just the way the magic works in that system kind of reminds me of an embellished old D&D. But yeah, I am excited to read through these.
Yeah, I have both the first and the second ones in that series on audiobook, because I plan on hitting the second one up as soon as I get done with the first one.
I just have a problem with audiobooks. I start to tune them out, because I do this with real books too, where I suddenly, you ever do that thing where you read a whole page but you didn't absorb any of it and then you have to start over? I do that with audiobooks, but it's harder to go back to where I need to in an audiobook. So I'll have listened to a guy spoke, but I wasn't really hearing anything.
See, for me, the only problem I have with audiobooks is if the narrator's bad.
Oh.
And for the Rathen, for at least for the first one, I don't know if we got the same narrator for the second one. I guess we'll find out. If it's the same narrator, he's doing a really good job. Like he does like voices for all the different characters, like accents and everything. So
I love that.
It's really good. It's like you GMing. Like every character's got their own little voice going on.
Give him a little voice, because and you kind of have to do that as a GM. Well, you don't have to do anything you don't want to as a GM, but in tabletop games, if you don't give different NPCs different voices, it's harder for the players to follow the conversation when you jump between characters. All right, so that's what we've done, and that's what we've got planned. While we discuss today's main topic, what are we drinking today? I will tell you, because I have the
brought
answer.
it.
I brought it. It is a red wine. It is a Cabernet Sauvignon. It is by the Kings of Prohibition, which is I don't know if anyone's sensing a theme today. We're talking about Call of Cthulhu, Prohibition era 1920s fantasy novel, or not novels, miniatures. We are the Game Master Speakeasy. We're drinking a Prohibition wine. Anyway, this is a wine that, according to the bottle, is a limited release. Or I don't know if that just means it's just this barrel or if it's just this type of bottle design, but it's coming from southeastern Australia.
Oh, wow.
And Kings of Prohibition Cabernet Sauvignon is complex with vibrant flavors of forest berries and plums with underlying savory notes of spicy French oak. Do you get any of that when you drink this? I'm honestly not good at identifying flavors in alcohol.
I am not a wine drinker, so I mean, it's good, but yeah. I mean, like the way that I can drink a beer and kind of give it a baseline evaluation, or the way that I can eat food and tell you exactly what seasonings go into it, I can't do that with wine because I just don't know enough about it.
I will say this: usually this would be, if I'm not mistaken, wine snobs in the audience can flame me if they want, but I believe Cabernet is usually considered more of a dry wine, and I don't think this is too dry. It's got enough of that fruity hints in there for me. That not that don't get me wrong. If I'm in the mood, I'll drink a wine that is as dry as the Mojave. But I don't consider this to be that bad. It comes in a nice bottle with a screw top, so you don't have to work to get at it, and that I appreciate.
I enjoy it. It tastes good. It's wine and it has alcohol in it. I can't give you any more of an in-depth evaluation than that.
I wanted to break up the monotony. You know, we started to do some cocktails and break up the beer monotony. But, you know, one thing that is interesting about Prohibition is they would start to sell people these, like, blocks that you were supposed to put in water and then ferment yourself, and that's how you would get wine in the Prohibition era. So I just wanted to, you know, we are a speakeasy, and I wanted to touch on the fact that wine was also hard to get back in those periods.
I mean, everything was hard to get.
So moving on, as we continue to sip this cab, let us talk about One D&D.
All right.
So you and I do have a lot of experience with 5th edition. We don't have any experience with previous editions of D&D,
That's
to
right.
my knowledge. I have a minor amount of I've made a character in 3.5. I've played half a session in 3.5 many years ago. Don't even really remember it. I just remember that my character was a orc barbarian and did not know how to read.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you. But we're here to focus on One D&D, which is Wizards' new hotness. It's going to be you took 5th edition, you're going to put a spit shine on it, put a new coat of paint on it, change some rules around, some of which I believe are for the better, because they seem to be inspired by, well, let's be honest, both
Pathfinder 2.
Well, Pathfinder 2, but Pathfinder 2 is inspired by what? Pathfinder 1, which was inspired by what? D&D 3.5. So it's kind of just a return to roots.
We've come full circle.
Yeah, we come full circle. But the feats that are in the first document that has released over the coming months, they're supposed to release multiple playtest packets. The first one has to do with character origins, and this is a decision I actually really like, and I think Pathfinder 2 could do this and follow suit, where your ability score bonuses are no longer tied to your race/ancestry. In Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, they had an optional rule for that where just, hey, pick a +2/+1 that fits your character. Now they're going to tie it to your background, which Pathfinder 2 does. Pathfinder 2 does both, right? You've got your ancestral ability boosts, and then you've also got your background boosts.
Yep.
In this, that being 1D&D, your ability boosts are tied strictly to your background. So, you know, you roll your stats or you take standard array, and then you pick a background. Like, for instance, Guard gives you +2 strength and +1 wisdom. Then it gives you skill proficiencies in athletics and perception, which is something that backgrounds already did in 5e. They gave you skill proficiencies, right? But I just like the idea that you can play any single ancestry and still get full effect from your character. So, you know, in older editions of D&D, dwarves couldn't even be wizards. It was just not allowed. Now you can have any character you want. I just like customization options. That's one of the reasons I like Pathfinder 2. So by divorcing your ability boosts from your race in D&D, then you now have essentially just more customization options baked in. But I should also mention the feats. Do you remember what Alert did in 5th edition? It was Jared took it every single time.
That was that and luck were his go-tos. Alert gave him a whole crap load of extra bonus to his initiative. It was like +5 or something.
It is exact. Yeah, you are correct. So you can't be surprised while you're conscious, and you gain +5 bonus to initiative, and then other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. But the new version of Alert is kind of different. So when you pick your background, it comes with a feat baked in addition to the other benefits that you get. Like, for instance, Sailor has... Well, no, actually, no. Let me look at one that has Alert, maybe. No, forget it. Sailor has +2 dex, +1 wisdom. Then you get a tool proficiency in a language, and it comes with acrobatics and perception. Then also you get the feat Tavern Brawler, which is the one that makes your melee attacks do more than just 1+ strength. You actually get like a die roll or something like that. The difference between the old Alert, which we have just described, and the new Alert is, with the new Alert, you are always on the lookout for danger, and you gain the following benefits. Initiative proficiency. When you roll initiative, you can add your proficiency proficiency bonus to the roll. So rather than a normal +5, it starts off at 2 and eventually becomes 6.
Yeah,
right?
so that's probably better, actually. Like the idea that it scales this level with levels.
Well, then that's one reason I don't know why they didn't do that for, what was it, Great Weapon Master? Let you let you like sack 10 for +5. That should have always been tied to proficiency, as with the there was a ranged version of that too, right? Because at low levels, it can be
+5
pretty
is huge.
+5 is a lot of damage, right? Or it was wasn't it like -5 +10 or something like that?
Yeah, I think the damage was +10.
Yeah.
And it was like a -5 from your roll?
Right. So, and they could have always, from the get-go, had it been subtract your proficiency bonus, then double your proficiency bonus and damage.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the hacks that we started to use later on. But I like that, they had proficiency bonus, which was a scaling thing all throughout 5e, and then for certain things that could have used scaling, they just didn't use it.
Yeah, it would have been
Right?
perfect use for that as a scaling mechanic.
I should, but I'm not done. So you get your bonus to your proficiency bonus is added to your initiative, but then you have something called initiative swap instead of the other benefits. Immediately after you roll initiative, you can swap your initiative with the initiative of one willing ally in the same combat. You can't make this swap if you or the ally is incapacitated. So that's kind of like you're alert, so you were able to call out and warn somebody.
You
or something,
warn
right?
the fighter so he gets to
Yeah,
go
so
first.
he gets to go first, right? And I think that's pretty thematic. It makes your choice of background more important. Oh, I should also state that this is something not everybody knows, but in 5th edition, you can create custom backgrounds with GM approval. It's in the player's handbook, right?
Yeah.
Now, it was something that kind of flew under everybody's radar, and now they're being more clear with the language and encouraging people to come up with their own custom backgrounds. There's bones enough to use as an example. Pick 2 skill proficiencies, pick a language, pick a tool proficiency, pick a feat. As long as it is thematic and fits your background, whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, I want to... This is not going to be a hot take, but the changes to backgrounds and these first level feats, awesome. I think it's a great change for 5th edition. Everyone always wanted a first level feat anyway,
Yeah.
and none of the ones listed here are the combat focused ones. I mean, there are some that relate to combat, but none of these are the ones that are just, hey, you do more damage.
Yeah.
Right? They're always going to provide you with something interesting to do.
Spell Sniper not in there?
Well, Spell Sniper...
I mean, it's technically combat. It just doubles your range.
It doubles your range, but I'm talking more about the ones that just up your damage potential. Because, like, Magic Initiate is in here as an available one, which is you pick... Oh, that's my segue. From Magic Initiate to the spell lists. In 5th edition, every class had a tailor-made spell list, right? They're copying Pathfinder 2, which I will confess, I don't know if another system has done this already. But in Pathfinder 2, it's Arcane, Primal, Occult, and Divine. One D&D is, at least in the playtest, is going to just go with Arcane, Primal, and Divine. Those are the 3 spell lists, and depending on what class you are, you get access to one of those 3 spell lists. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think it simplifies things, and that's not a bad thing. I don't know if it gives... I guess, I mean, if they're going for simplicity over granularity, I like it. I mean, because, like, the Warlock spell list, for example, was pretty limited compared to some of the other class, like, spellcasters, which, I mean, is fine because you're cantrip pounding anyway.
Yeah, but technically, if there's only these 3 spell lists... That means anyone could have Hex if it was a spell that was included.
That's true.
Anyone could have Hex. Anyone could have Armor of Agatha. The spells that were pretty unique to the Warlock
that's true.
Now anyone... Because I assume those spells would be on the Arcane spell list, which means Wizards just have those. No, because there were only 3. There were only Arcane, Primal, and Divine.
There's no Occult.
There's no Occult.
Yeah, then
they're not
Arcane
exactly They're not exactly copying Pathfinder 2. So they're copying the concept, but there's no Occult spell list. It's just Arcane, Primal, and Divine, which means Wizards now can get Hex. And that's assuming Hex is still a spell, right? They could change spells, move them around, rename them,
or they could make Hex a class feature, like we did in the homebrew.
Exactly.
Which
many homebrews would just take Hex and make it a class feature.
So I mean, yeah, there's definitely some options there.
But that also means
what would
that
the Druid do then? Is that Divine?
No, Druid would be Primal.
Oh yeah, duh, the primal.
Yeah, primal, divine, and
Yeah, no, that makes
ranger
sense.
would also be primal. So
I mean, what this really means is that my warlock would have a whole lot more spells to access because with the entire arcane tree, he's going to be rocking the same stuff as a wizard.
all right, I've actually found it. At the bottom of the document, they do have 0 and first level spells, and both Armor of Agathis and Hex are listed as arcane spells. Yep. Which means a wizard would have access to them.
Stuff.
Now that said, as far as damage goes, let's talk about rolling natural 20s and critical hits.
I
and
do
things
remember
like
reading
that.
about, or not reading about this, listening to a podcast
Yeah,
about it.
you listen to a podcast about it. Can you tell me what you remember from the podcast you listened to?
They're changing the natural 20s to auto successes, aren't they?
Yeah, so whereas in 5th edition, natural 20s only meant something in combat, right?
Yeah, it was always a critical in combat.
It was
like
always
no
a-
matter what their AC was, if you got a natural 20, you landed.
Yes, but saving throws and ability checks, a natural 20 didn't necessarily mean diddly squat. Rules as written.
Yeah.
Because that's just how it was worded. Now, no matter what your D20 test is, a natural 20 is a success and a natural 1 is a failure, right? However, so I do like this change because they're keeping inspiration. For those who don't know, in 5th edition, inspiration is a meta resource where you use up your inspiration and it gives you advantage on the roll.
Aren't they getting a little more generous with that, too?
Well, yes, because if you roll a natural 20 on any D20 test, you get inspiration. So you don't have to rely on just the Game Master to dole it out. You can only ever have one inspiration at a time, same as usual. You can still give it to other players. However, when you take a long rest, you lose your inspiration. Which I didn't...
Unless you're human.
Oh, is that a human
I'm
thing?
pretty
I didn't
sure
read that.
one of the human traits is that they get an inspiration every day. Period. Full
Wow.
stop.
Okay. See, I didn't read all the.
Well, see, and I haven't read this document. I went through and I listened to 2 different podcasts on the subject.
I've been jumping around on it because
But I think humans get auto inspiration.
I actually really like that because it makes playing human a little bit more interesting.
I mean, everybody makes fun of me because like 90% of my characters are human, but this just encourages me to go right back to that bad behavior.
I am
Not
hoping,
bad behavior, I love it.
in the document they've got elves, orcs, gnomes. I think they've got all the basic races are in here. And they've added ardlings. I don't know if you looked at that.
Yeah,
at
those
all.
are like animal people.
Yeah.
I think that one of the guys that I was listening to, God, I wish I'd credit him if I could remember it, but he was talking about how now there's no half elves and there's no half orcs.
Oh, really?
Because you can mix any 2 races you want to, and you can just pick the traits from them.
Oh, see, I didn't catch that. I kind of skipped past the race stuff
Well, now see, and
for now.
anybody that's listening, please fact check this or look it up yourself because I have not read this document at all. This is all from like podcasts that I've been listening to about it. So if that guy was full of shit, then so am I because I'm just repeating what I was told. But yeah, so like if you were making a tiefling, you could make it like they've taken.
Well, that makes sense
they've
because
gotten rid of half orcs and half elves,
Yeah.
and they've put in full-blooded orcs. So now, if you wanted to make a half orc,
You're just
your
making-
ancestor, you would pick basically your favorite of the ancestries of human or orc.
finally I can live out my dreams of being an elf orc
An elf orc.
or an elf orc or an orc elf or a orel. Anyway. I do like that. I think that's a good change. I consider that to be a good change. I consider the feats being tacked onto backgrounds as a good change. I like the D20 change actually, where it's a natural success because that's what everyone already, even when it's not already an automatic success, celebrates when they get a natural 20. Right? Oh, it's a 20! Hey.
The only thing I would say about that is, from a GM's perspective, if a D20 hitting a 20 means a guaranteed success, you have to be willing to tell your players that they're not allowed to roll if the result for them is impossible.
Right, yeah. So
If you have a character with like 0 medical skill trying to perform brain surgery,
on a dead guy.
yeah, you just tell them you're not allowed to make this roll because
that's not a roll. That's just impossible.
It's impossible for your character to do because the second you let them roll, they have a 5% chance of literally accomplishing whatever it is they ask if you allow them to hit the die.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to say, this is something that your character is incapable of achieving.
Yep.
Do not roll the die.
And if you want to be that guy, the example is like, oh, I hurl my spear at the moon,
Yeah.
right? And then they get a natural. You allow them to roll, and they get a natural 20. You can say, yes, you hurl your spear at the moon so well it goes out of sight and very far away. Well, does it hit the moon? Oh, you didn't say to the moon. You said at the moon. You can really genie it up. I don't encourage that.
Yeah, no.
don't be that guy. But you technically rules as written could.
Just don't let them roll for something that is physically impossible for
Lance
their character
is
to achieve.
absolutely correct about that. Just
And you will have to be a little bit of an authoritative game master if that particular rule gets implemented, because that's just, like no strength roll in the world is going to allow your character to pick up a adult dragon or what am I thinking of? Ancient dragon. There we go.
yeah, an ancient dragon.
I don't care. Your goblin can't pick up an ancient dragon no matter how high your strength roll is. It's just not a thing that you can do.
So let's talk about the natural 20s in terms of combat. So what do you remember about the critical hits and how they've changed?
They are changing the way certain abilities and spells crit, or in this case, some of them just can't now.
So I'm going to read you the first couple lines of it. Weapons and unarmed strikes have a special feature for player characters: critical hits. If a player character rolls a natural 20 for an attack roll with a weapon or unarmed strike, the attack is also a critical hit, which means it deals extra damage to the target. You roll the damage dice of the weapon or unarmed strike a second time and add the second roll as extra damage to the target. And then I won't read the example.
Rip sneak attack.
Rip sneak attack. Rip smite. Rip spell attack rolls.
Yeah.
They said weapon and unarmed strikes. I'll go out on a limb and actually say that the reason that most people are mad, and this is coming from a person who has not read Reddit posts or forum threads, the reason people are mad is because spell attack rolls can't crit. I honestly don't think it's a big deal if your smite damage can't crit. Smite damage critting was already pretty stupid. As a game master, it made it impossible to balance encounters. Reining in class features that give extra damage dice is perfectly fine for me. Honestly.
I kind of agree, but I think that, and I don't know what the new numbers are going to look like, but I feel like if they're going to do that, they're going to have to adjust the base damage codes of some of those spells.
Well, I would think that more so they will adjust the base HP of monsters.
That could be too. The other thing, and this is maybe from a GM perspective, I don't like the fact that NPCs can't crit.
Yeah, there it is. I didn't know if you caught that.
Oh, I caught it.
Yeah,
no, I caught that.
Player characters can crit. Monsters cannot crit in One D&D.
I understand that does give a certain degree of predictability and control to the monsters, but I think it also makes them less threatening. To be honest with you, when I get hit by a monster, I usually can kind of use that as a baseline to figure out how much damage they're going to do.
Right.
And that kind of gives you a roundabout of, okay, how many times can this thing punch me in the face before I, get dropped like a sack of puppies? And crits always kind of throw an element of chaos into that, where you're like, okay, I can do a fine unless it crits me, then all of a sudden things start going sideways. So taking those crits away from that monsters, I think, while it gives predictability to it, I think it kind of reduces a little bit of fear from the players, or for their characters as far as what they can take. So right. I don't know how much I like that, honestly, from a GM's perspective.
I will also say this. In 5e, when we played, most of the monsters were bags of hit points that did damage. Whereas in Pathfinder, all the monsters usually have like a unique ability that they can do, or two, or something. There's elements of the monsters that are unknowns besides when they're going to crit.
Yeah.
And we haven't played since they released it, but it's Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse is an updated monster book of 5e monsters where they took a note from Pathfinder 2e and gave the monsters more interesting things to do.
So maybe that'll be less of an issue because they have a little more variability in the kind of attacks.
If they keep following that path, then I don't think crits are necessary for monsters, because as long as your monsters have like 2 or 3 action-related things to throw into the fight, then who cares if there's a crit? Like, oh, they can't crit, but he can do this cool ability once every 2 rounds where he slams the ground and 3 people get stunned, and
that would make a functional alternative to crits if you're going to do that. If they're going to retain the kind of most monsters just randomly swing and hit you,
Yeah.
and that's it. Taking crits away takes away a really good random element to keep the players on their toes.
Also, I don't remember which one it is, but I was reading a Reddit post and someone pointed out there's an entire cleric subclass about reducing crits against your allies.
Yeah, that's true. They're going to have to do something about that guy.
Adamantine armor doesn't do anything for you anymore.
That's true. I remember I had some of that for a
so
while.
things like that. So, and don't get me wrong, this is early playtest, so I'm sure that as the playtest goes on, these things would get their attention.
I think of all the things that they have proposed so far, the one that they're catching the most amount of shit for is the crits right now.
Honestly, yeah. The
And
crits.
I think that if anything sees any major changes from the playtest moving forward, I think that's probably the one that's most likely to get hit in some way. And maybe it won't be that the monsters get crits, and maybe they won't. But I mean, I don't think that the way that the crits are given to us now, I don't think that's going to survive all the way into, at least as it is, like 100%. I don't think it's going to survive.
It will change somehow.
Something in there's
Something
gonna
about
change,
it will change, right?
because they're catching. That's the thing they're catching. I think the most flack for.
Yeah, is the critical hit thing has got to be the one that's ruffling the most feathers, because everything else seems pretty cool to me.
Yeah, I mean, I could take or leave them removing the attribute bonuses from like the ancestries of the races. That it doesn't bother me one way. I mean, orcs are on a bell curve stronger than humans if strength is a thing that they get. But if you want to play that kind of aberrant orc that's like the scrawny nerdy guy, and you want to focus more into like the weird orc mage, because orcs typically are weird orc wizards, because typically orcs aren't seen in that light.
Oh yeah.
That leaves you the option for that. So I mean, that's one of those things that I'm neutral on. I don't care that they did it. I don't care. Like, I'm not happy or sad that they changed it. It doesn't really affect me in any way.
I am most looking forward to seeing how they approach changing some of the classes. Ranger. This is going to be one that I'm looking for. After all these long
Oh my
years,
God, we have
are they
talked
going
so
to
much
implement
about-
some more Ranger changes?
Yeah.
I want to see how, if they're going to stick to their guns and keep testing crits like this, how are they going to change certain class mechanics? Because One D&D is supposed to be backwards compatible with 5th edition content. So what does that mean? How about this? What are some things that you would like them to look at? I'll start, actually,
Yeah, you
as an
start.
example. No one, the two classes that revolve around short rests need to revolve around long rests instead. Warlock and Monk need to just have better access to their limited resources. Because, let's face it, they designed 5th edition to be a dungeon crawler, and no one uses it for that. People use it to emulate Critical Role with big sweeping plot lines and cool and cool stories, and very few people just roll up a dungeon and dungeon crawl. 5e is actually really well equipped to have an adventuring day inside a dungeon. It's just that comes up so little.
Well, see,
in the way that people use the system.
I think the way that Pathfinder does that better is with focus points.
Yeah.
Like, even if you blow yourself out of a lot of your spell slots, most caster classes, I mean, and some other classes, but I mean, they've got those focus points, so I've always got a little bit of something to fall back on. I might spend 20% of my overall, like, abilities in an encounter, but I might be able to get 10% of that back
Because
with the focus point rests.
And on top of that, what's considered the equivalent of a short rest in Pathfinder is only 10 minutes.
Yep.
Right, refocusing takes 10 minutes. Doing a first aid
Takes 10 minutes.
by default takes 10 minutes. Whereas a short rest in D&D, by rules as written, a whole hour.
Well, and if you're
it's just kind of, there's a flavor to it that makes it like, oh, I don't want to spend a whole. We got somewhere to be. We can't spend a whole hour.
And that's the cool thing about, like, in Pathfinder, if you're doing kind of a high pressure dungeon crawl,
you
you only have 10 minutes to do first aid, so you're not getting the full first aid thing. You're like, I'm going to patch you up, and we're going to go into the next room, and we're going to fight whatever's in there, because we don't have all day to get this done.
We can't be screwing around.
Well, and that's the thing. And I mean, I'm glad that you didn't beat us up like this. But I always thought, hey, if we're going to take a long rest in a dungeon, there should be a high likelihood we're going to get attacked during that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like we should be something the kobolds or the goblins or
random
something.
encounters,
Should
high
be,
level
should be trying to
alerts.
screw up our rest and just beat our asses. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And you're like, okay. I mean, and there could be safe rooms in the dungeons where that's possible, but it shouldn't be like, and we can do this wherever we want thing.
My favorite is when players find a room and they make it safe. Like, all right, we're going to barricade up in here. I'm going to use my pythons to bar the door.
And I'm going to cast this spell that puts us in a pocket dimension where we can sleep for a little while.
Oh my god, I hope they get rid of that shit. All the spells and features that they have in the game that just kind of nullify exploration challenges, I have always hated them. Right? Like, wasn't one of the backgrounds in base 5e just like, hey, you just find food for everybody?
Yeah, there was one of them in there that
Outlander.
Yeah,
Outlander sucks. What a boring, what a shit background. I hate that crap. Like, people talk about how the 3 pillars of D&D are combat and
exploration.
Exploration and social encounters, right? And then the exploration sucks because they have all these things in there to just hand wave exploration. One of my players hates tracking shit like that. Moose hates bartering. Moose hates tracking minutia like that. But I'm going to tell you right now, this to everybody. The more that you have to get into the nitty gritty of that stuff, the more rewarding the exploration pillar of gaming feels.
Sure. And that's,
you got to work for that feeling of.
I know I keep bringing up Pathfinder, but
we simp for Pathfinder.
I kind of do.
Now.
Well, you know, and I think I was kind of lukewarm on Pathfinder too when we first started because I wasn't really warm on how they handled magic because it honestly was just too well balanced. I
remember.
Like, I can't be a spellcasting god anymore.
No, you can't.
You know,
can't
but
be a spellcasting god until really late levels.
I've warmed up to it. I've gotten to the point, like, overall the mechanic. No, I still kind of favor marshals over casters, but I mean, I really like the system. But I think that they can kind of help to mitigate the spells and abilities that kind of trivialize exploration with the rare and uncommon tags, because every time that happens, I got to be like, hey Cody, am I allowed to take this ability for this character? Does it make sense? Do you want it in your game?
I love that system.
And you know, and if I'm like, hey, I want Goodberry, so I never have to worry about starvation ever again in my entire life, and you're like, we're running a survival campaign. You're not taking Goodberry.
Well, you can take Goodberry, but you have to spend a feat on it. So that's the thing, right? It's an uncommon focus cantrip.
Yeah.
It uses your focus point. You have to spend a feat on it. Bro, you earned it.
Yeah, well, but I mean, that's a lot easier than 5th edition, where it's like, I'm going to take this first
level basic spell. Congrats. The whole party just doesn't need to worry about rations.
I can crank out one berry for every party member every single morning for one spell slot. One first level spell slot, and we will never starve.
This is why 5 Torches Deep exists, even. It's like a hack. It's like an OSR inspired hack for 5e, essentially, that really helps to get the more sword and sorcery.
But you know, I think part of that comes from 5e being the kind of system that wants to be a little bit of everything to everybody.
It is.
Like, if you are building a game and
Wizards wants D&D to be a lifestyle brand, like Nike or just Nike's my first example.
Yeah,
you know, they want people to buy the gear and be like, this is a D&D household.
Yeah,
this is a Ford household.
Oh no, exactly, and that's the thing. So when you look for games that do that, the ones that really want to lean into those mechanics do and they deliberately ensure that like there aren't spells in there that are easily accessible that trivialize things. Now, you know, if you wanted to make Goodberry like a 5th level spell, that might be a little different, because once your druid gets to a certain level of power,
they should be
the idea that he can make it so starvation is never a concern.
And then it feels like a reward, right?
Yeah,
now you've gone through that crap.
I've made it all the way up to access to 5th level spell slots, and now I can do Goodberry. Yeah. I think that's the reason that Pathfinder has Sending is such a high level spell.
Oh yeah,
it's because it trivializes long distance communication. Period. Like, you never have to worry about long distance communication.
When you think about writing and creating drama, it's a lot easier to create drama if you set your story before cell phones existed.
Oh yeah, oh for sure.
Because cell phones are just sending. Oh, by the way, the bad guy's on his way.
Yeah.
And you go back to 1920. Oh, we gotta get there. We gotta get there in time. Oh.
Yeah. If you know the big bad is on his way to this village or this kingdom with the intent of destroying it, if you can call them in advance and give them fair warning, then the urgency for your party to attempt to catch up to him or get there early enough to defend and warn the city becomes minimal.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, because if you call them in advance, they can set up their defense. They can at least buy the time until the party gets there to help out. If they don't know what's coming, well, that's a whole other issue.
Oh yeah. So this is there's some other stuff to look up in here, but I think we hit these are the major talking points that I wanted to talk about. We'll probably talk about 1D&D some more in the future when we've got additional playtest packets released.
Playtest packets, more information, seeing kind of how the community responds to the existing stuff that's in there once they get the chance to actually test it. Because, I mean, right now it's a lot of talking.
It is.
It's a lot of, this is what I read and I like it, or this is what I read and I don't like it. But, I mean, a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to implement most of this stuff.
Yeah, and they don't even have really big explanations on new monster stats.
Yeah.
Right? Currently, you just use the monsters that are in the books that are already printed.
Yep, and you just hope they work with the new stuff.
You just hope they work with the new stuff. So, that said, speaking of being a god caster, I would like to, next episode, we'll talk about some more narrative play types of systems, and specifically we're going to talk about the Icon playtest next episode.
Okay. You'll have to tell me all about that. I know
we'll
you're
talk about that
it.
next episode, because we got to wrap up here. It's last call. Time to kind of end things, wind things down, and get the heck out of Dodge and back home safely. We want to thank everyone for showing up today to the Game Master Speakeasy, enjoying a drink, sitting and relaxing, listening to us babble on and on about the world's most successful role-playing game and the future that is beheld for it. Lance, do you have any final thoughts about 1D&D?
I don't think it's going to replace Pathfinder in my heart. I just don't.
That's fair. Pathfinder, like I said, I think that's probably true. I will definitely be willing to give it a chance, but right now Pathfinder has carved out a niche in my soul, and I'm willing to stick to it for now.
Yeah.
But be on the lookout for the future playtests. If you have any thoughts that you would like to share with us about the playtest, go ahead and email us at Game Master Speakeasy Official at gmail.com.
GM Speakeasy Official.
Oh, God, we haven't done this in a while. GM Speakeasy Official at gmail.com. And where you can send us all your thoughts, concerns, ideas for topics. If you just want to tell us we're wrong about crits and you love the way crits work in 1D&D, be my guest. That said, we hope that you all get home safe.
See ya.
Want to hear more from the record button? You can find us wherever you find podcasts, like Transistor, Stitcher, Spotify, and YouTube. To stay up to date on our releases, find us on Facebook at the Record Button Production Group and on Twitter at TRBPRODGRP. Or stop by our website at recordbuttongroup.com, where we have links to our merch and other shows such as Wasteland Active Radio and Why Did I Write This? Thank you for listening.